Our next speaker is Don Ostler. He is presently the Executive Director of the Upper Colorado Basin Commission, and before that he was the Director of the Utah Division of Water Quality. Mr. Ostler.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed the talks up to this point in time. There's always healthy tension between the upper basin and the lower basin as the California perspective on how much water is required to be delivered. I think Jerry said it more clearly to me during the break. It's just the upper basin should deliver all of its water to the lower basin. I told him that we are. I appreciated the comments earlier about the need for prayer for engineers being one of the few water buffaloes here. Sometimes it feels like you're a water buffalo in a bull ring, and you know what happens to the bull in a bull ring as it runs past. There's people that want to jab a sharp spear in your back. So I appreciate Patty's thoughts with regards to engineers. They've asked me to talk about the Upper Basin's plans to develop its full compact apportionment of water, its full water supply, and what do we envision the consequences of that may be. And in order to do that, I need to cover just a little bit of what may have already been covered with regards to the 1922 Colorado River Compact. What is the Upper Basin's full apportionment? What is our water supply? Let me just, to explain some of the compact issues to you, turn to this map, which I like the best in order to talk about it. But the Colorado River Compact, as previously mentioned, divided the basin into two divisions for administrative purposes at Lee Ferry, Arizona, 16 miles below Glen Canyon Dam. And the upper basin is comprised of all of the waters that drain into the Colorado River above that point. And you'll note that that doesn't fit state lines. It fits a hydrologic boundary rather than exactly state lines. It was indicated that the St. George area of Utah drains into Lake Mead. That's a lower basin drainage area. There are areas in New Mexico that drains into the lower basin, and there is this area in Arizona that drains in above Lee Ferry. The Colorado River is significant then. The states that are typically considered the upper basin states are New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, with the lower basin states being, as mentioned, Arizona, California, and Nevada. The waters of the Colorado are delivered to a wide group of people, not just in the upper basin, but the lower basin. Some 25 million people depend upon the water of the Colorado River. And a lot of the water of the Colorado River goes out of the basin of the Colorado River. For example, there's a considerable amount of water that goes to the east slope of the Rockies and the Platte River drainage, in the Fort Collins, Denver, Colorado Springs area, up into the Cheyenne area, in the Platte River, in Utah into the Great Basin, through Utah County and Salt Lake County. And in New Mexico, water goes from the Colorado River into the Rio Grande River drainage basin as it serves Albuquerque. Noteworthy into the lower basin, Colorado River water goes all the way to the Los Angeles Basin, where a large population base depends upon Colorado River water from Los Angeles to San Diego. And of course, the Central Arizona Project stretches Colorado River across almost the entire state of Arizona through Phoenix and Tucson. So Colorado River water is stretched a long ways geographically, and there are a lot of folks that are very heavily dependent upon it in a very arid region of the United States. Just a view of the upper portion of the Colorado River, Flaming Gorge Reservoir on the Green River portion, the Colorado River in the upper portions of the Colorado. As the Colorado meanders and makes its way to Lake Powell, going through Utah's canyon country. Lake Powell, the major feature in the upper Colorado River Basin in terms of storage, and as has already been mentioned, is very, very important in the decision about how much water is available for the upper basin to develop. In order to meet the terms that were negotiated in the compact, Lake Powell plays a very major, significant role, storing about 24 million acre-feet of water. And then on down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. It's not a very good picture, but Hoover Dam at Lake Mead, which is the primary regulatory storage facility in the lower basin. A little more about the compact as far as what's the upper basin share. Again, the compact did apportion 7.5 million acre-feet per year of uses to both the upper basin and to the lower basin. And it apportioned those uses in perpetuity. I think the compact drafters were wise at that point, not to just allow the Colorado River water to go to the quickest, fastest growing, most uncontrolled place that it could go. Whoever reaches the most growth. The idea was that it would be preserved in perpetuity, allowing for certainty that water would be there so that growth could be planned and projects could be developed in a rational way. Now, the lower basin in the compact was also given the right to use a million additional acre-feet of water, supposedly from additional tributary water, etc. Just a little bit more about the compact, again, that affects what's available for the upper basin. But again, in 1922, the compact drafters did envision ultimately supplying water to Mexico. They just didn't know how much. But they said when that was decided, they determined how it would be provided to Mexico. And again, exhibiting the feeling of surplus water that they felt existed at that time would be supplied first from surplus water. But if there was not surplus, the amount required for Mexico would be borne equally by the upper basin and the lower basin. And then finally, an interesting provision, it placed the burden upon the upper basin of not causing the flow at Lee Ferry to be depleted below 75 million acre-feet in a 10-year running total in any 10 years. So the upper basin bears the risk of droughts and must meet that obligation by cutting back its uses if it can't meet that delivery at Lee Ferry. And finally, the Mexican Treaty in 1944 with World War II going on and all of the other political issues that were surrounding resulted in an agreement between the United States and Mexico to supply 1.5 million acre-feet per year, a little bit more water when there's surplus, and it allowed the United States to reduce deliveries to Mexico when there was extraordinary drought in the same proportion that uses were restricted in the United States. So that's kind of the ground rules that say how much water is available for the upper basin to consume. In 1948, the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact was agreed upon and ratified by Congress, and it did divide the waters further among the states in the upper basin. You'll note that some water was provided to Arizona at that time, and then the traditional upper basin states, their share was divided according to the percentages that are listed there, like 51.75% for Colorado, 23% for Utah, and so forth. And so you would assume that if there's 7.5 million acre-feet of water available, that Utah's share would be 23% of 7.5. And that may or may not be the case, depending upon the amount of water. And all of the upper basin states continue to assert their right to use the amount of water that was apportioned to them in the compact. However, they're not blindly proceeding to develop without really taking a hard look at what's the available water supply. So the promise and the reality, I would say a promise is the wrong word, but the Colorado River Compact envisioned that most of the time there would be 7.5 million acre-feet of water available for the upper basin. The compact also envisioned that there would be droughts. It envisioned times when there wasn't that amount of water. It was a flexible compact that envisioned many of the circumstances we face today. They just seem new, but there are provisions in the compact. It's because we haven't had to face them until now. So the reality is that much water may not really be there. The question may be, did the upper basin get a bad deal because there's really less water probably available than was thought? That would be left to your own debate. This graph you've seen before, but it's this axis is years starting in 1896 going to 2004. This is the flow of the Colorado River. This axis is the acre-feet of water per year, with about 15 million acre-feet being in that range. 1922 is right in this vicinity. And just looking at the graph, you can see the historical record that the compact drafters had to work with was this. Yet that does not look like what we have had since. You can see there's a difference in the water supply. And we do take into account the reality of that water supply. As has mentioned, at the present, the river is really somewhat over-apportioned on the basis of 7.5 and 8.5 for the lower basin. That period of time was a wet period in the record. And the compact places the burden of lack of water on the upper basin to some extent with regards to the amount of uses that the upper basin can have and meeting that 75 million acre foot of delivery in 10 years. So the upper basin has not blindly proceeded to develop, assuming only 7.5 million acre feet. The upper basin, the Bureau of Reclamation, has looked at the most critical periods that we have seen on record, a 25-year period, and tried to analyze how much water is really available for the upper basin while still meeting that burden of 75 million acre feet of water in a 10-year running period. And the states, in so doing, have also had to make assumptions about risk. The states have assumed, in looking at the amount of water available, that a 6%, 6 years out of 100, it would be tolerable to have a shortage, rather than having a water supply based upon the possibility of never having a shortage, and throughout 100 years always having excess water that could have been utilized by the upper basin go to Jerry's folks. But the upper basin, I think in these assumptions of a 6% shortage, used a very conservative level of shortage, only 6 years out of 100 as an acceptable level for shortage. I think the shortage projections for the lower basin are probably somewhat higher than that based upon the level of development that they have already achieved. The states in the upper basin also have planned for the normal losses that would occur through evaporation and transport. And in this process, the states have concluded that there may be in the neighborhood of 6 million acre feet of water available. We think not less than 6 million acre feet of water would be available under these assumptions. And upper basin states are planning their development based upon that level of water supply. So the compact, even though it was 1922, through the operation of the compact, the flexibilities that exist, changes are made to react to the conditions that really are occurring. The upper basin uses have shown a steady increase. This, for those of you that can't see, is 1971, and the year 2000 shows a steady increase in uses. These are acre feet and thousands of acre feet. And so you can see high use of a little bit less than 5 million acre feet in this period. During times of drought, the uses have been less, or if there's unusual weather that provides a lot of water, sometimes uses are less. This does not show the most recent drought, and what occurred in the most recent drought is in the year 2002 we also had a high period of use because there was water available in reservoir storage. There was heavy evaporation. It took a lot of water to irrigate crops. And then after 2002, because storage was reduced significantly in the drought in the period of 2004, we showed significantly less use, getting down to about 3.8 or 3.9 million acre feet of use again, reflecting the shortage that occurs in the upper basin. I think I would use this just to illustrate that the upper basin not only has to meet the 75 million acre feet in 10 years, but that the upper basin, because of lack of storage where the users are in the high tributaries, has shortages occur on a regular basis almost every year. And the high period of shortage during this recent drought was probably 1 million acre feet of water that was shorted. That's something that we live with and we manage through water rights. And then finally, relative to the upper basin development plans, we have to look at population projections. And within the Colorado River Basin, this arid part of the United States, we are seeing some phenomenal growth projections. Over the next 20 years, at least a 26% increase in people are expected in the upper basin states. That will require considerable effort to continue to meet the water supply demands and the other demands for non-urban water supply uses. But it's high growth rates. I think Utah is one of the fastest growing states in the Colorado River Basin, for example. As Jerry indicated, the states in the lower basin are growing also. And when they grow a percentage of their population, because their population is so large, you're talking about a lot of people. And a lot of change and a lot of impact can occur with population growth in the lower basin. And as Jerry would indicate, the lower basin is basically has developed and is utilizing basically 100% of their Colorado River apportionment. So things do need to change. The upper basin, again, with regards to the perpetuity of the availability of water that we think is available, looking at the projections that the upper basin states have made, still would expect over the next 50 or so years to be at or near their full compact apportionment, about a little bit less than 6 million acre feet, based upon the hydrologic determination that we have today, unless conditions change. So plans are being made to that would reach to that point in about that time period. So there is some time to allow that to occur. I would indicate also, as you look at this slide, associated with the additional development that occurs in the upper basin for all types of water supply uses, that along with that, to allow that, is a very significant effort that's being undertaken with regards to environmental projects and management of the river to ensure that this can be done in an effective way. The Upper Basin Recovery Program is a good example of this. These types of projects are occurring in order to allow the uses to be developed. This is also a change that wasn't envisioned in the compact, but the compact has had the flexibility to allow these kind of changes and uses to work. Water use projections, what may happen in the future. Everyone has their own crystal ball, but there are a lot of things that are becoming more clear. Certainly the Lake Powell pipeline would be a significant additional use or development of the Colorado River of maybe 100,000 acre feet. There are very active discussions about a pipeline from Flaming Gorge to supply water to the east slope of the Rockies, and that could be in the neighborhood of 150,000 acre feet of water per year. There are other projects that are being discussed other than these that would result in an additional development. It's been mentioned before, the impact of energy development in the Colorado River Basin could be very significant. If oil shale is actively developed and begins to boom, that will have a very large impact on our water supplies and would change the rate of reaching the upper basin's apportionment. And finally, I'd mention that not all upper basin states have water left to develop. The state of New Mexico is basically at their ceiling. They're now negotiating with the Navajo Nation an agreement which would use basically the remainder of New Mexico's Colorado River apportionment. So when you look at upper basin apportionments, and maybe that's the wrong word with regards to the right-hand column. The right-hand column is an agreed plan for development by the upper basin states. It's not what's specifically written in the compact. But here would be the amount of water that is available for each state to develop based upon the most recent hydrologic determination. There are questions of uncertainty about all of these things. People that plan for water supply have to deal with risk. And everyone is looking at all of the data that is out there. Does tree ring data indicate we should plan on even a smaller water supply? How will global warming affect the Colorado River water supply? Has the lower basin already developed more than what the river will support? These are all critical issues, and they will continue to be looked at and worked on, and with the flexibility that exists, further adjustments can be made. Jerry's indicated a number of adjustments that we're headed to. So what happens when the upper basin develops their full share? It's going to be less likely that Lake Powell will equalize or spill high flows to the lower basin. So it will be more likely that they receive the standard minimum objective release from Lake Powell or other release as agreed upon in the Basin States proposal. The lower basin uses are requiring releases from Lake Mead of about 9.3 or more million acre feet. And if most of the water coming into Lake Mead is what's coming from Lake Powell, there's a deficit there. That deficit really needs to be made up by having good years where Lake Powell equalizes or spills or provides surplus water. That will be less likely to occur in the future. Would make it more likely that shortage will occur in the lower basin. And it's more likely that legal conflict will break out between the basin states if we don't actively act to manage these issues. And the best example of that are some of the things that Jerry Zimmerman mentioned earlier with regards to the basin state proposals. So relative to drought management plans, which goes along with any plans to develop an upper basin share, there is a shortage plan that is being proposed for the lower basin, and discussions are nearing on improving the upper basin plan to deal with curtailments if they're necessary. The plan that Jerry mentioned to coordinate better the operation of Lake Powell and Lake Mead so that those reservoirs operate with the maximum efficiency, that Lake Powell is not blind to what's happening at Lake Mead, and Lake Mead uses are not blind to what's happening at Lake Powell to get the most that we can as far as surviving droughts. Conservation will have to be a cornerstone of any additional future development or getting by with what we have. Improved system operation and efficiency has to occur. And augmentation of the river flow to meet future growth needs, we think, is going to be essential to serve the population growth that we mentioned, whether it be ocean desalting or whether it be importation from other sources. As these needs occur, the willingness to pay will become more, and the ability to do that will become possible. And along with that may include opportunities for additional environmental improvements as it goes. So I guess the final pictures I'll leave you with is that of drought. The reason the upper basin states and the lower basin states are working so hard to come up with some modifications, we believe, within the Colorado River Compact is drought. And this is Glen Canyon Dam with over 100 foot of bathtub ring showing. Upper reaches of Glen Canyon Dam with a dry boat dock. I think that's the Height Marina. And again, upper reaches of Glen Canyon Dam. So we hope we are able to manage through the droughts and make wise decisions involving all of the stakeholders. And that's all I've got. If you'd like me to take some questions, if there are, 5 minutes. Okay. We've got just 5 minutes for questions. I can see a hand back there.
You said that the upper basin states are changing their planning based on that 6 billion acre foot figure. Are there specific things that you could point to in the state of Utah that have occurred?
The upper basin states, as I indicated, and the Bureau of Reclamation have looked at the amount of water supply available. And I think all of the states have agreed upon a set of assumptions that we have agreed to utilize. And the state of Utah has been part of that through the Upper Basin Commissioner, Dennis Strong, who is here today. And so all of the Upper Basin states have bought into the set of assumptions that we're using currently on the available water supply. Now, beyond that, I don't know, what you were getting at as far as specific plans, but I can't respond to that specifically. Right here, his hand was up.
What's the status of aquifers in the basin such as that at State Valley? According to the compact.
Well, the Colorado River Compact would view groundwater use within the Colorado River Basin as system water. Snake Valley is not considered within the Colorado River Basin. Is that right, Dennis? So that would not be considered Colorado River water. There's some difficulty in really quantifying groundwater use and what's really would flow to the Colorado River if it were not pumped out of the ground. There's debate and additional work that probably needs to be done there. But groundwater is considered part of the contributory flow of the Colorado River. In the back?
Could you put that slide back up about the projection of 7.5 to 6.1 for the state of what we're talking about? Yeah, that one there. Thank you.
Okay. Question here?
I couldn't help but be struck by your map of the Colorado River Basin that indicated that the Colorado River stopped at the international boundary with Mexico.
Oh.
What's the Upper Basin? Does the Upper Basin have any sort of obligation or plans to meet environmental needs in Mexico?
The first question that really I think ought to be asked is, does Mexico have plans to meet the environmental needs in Mexico? The Upper Basin, as they're developing water, has made specific plans to try to meet the environmental needs. And the Lower Basin, as they're developing water, has made plans to try to meet the environmental needs. And Mexico, as they develop water and use water, needs to develop their own plans to meet specific environmental needs. Now, whether as part of a larger negotiation with Mexico and the Basin states and the Department of Interior, further negotiations are done where there's some further assistance from the United States to try to meet those needs, anything is possible with regards to that. But I think the first place to look for the Mexican needs is that Mexico needs to also look at the use of water for environmental needs. And I don't think we have seen that to much extent at this point. So there's nothing specific, but certainly that's something that could come out of negotiations. One more? Okay, we've got one more back here.
I find it ironic that you speak of a diversion to the Mississippi Basin of water from Flaming Gorge, and prior speaker talks about a diversion from the Mississippi Basin. Could you possibly reconcile those
two? It is true that some of the water exported from the Colorado River does end up in the Mississippi River Basin. If water were brought in from the Mississippi, certainly that might allow some of those exports that are within the vicinity of where that water comes in to stop or diminish the amount of water they take from the Colorado River. That's the best answer that I can give you. That's way out in the horizon, but I think there would be a relationship there. I think that's the last one. Thank you very much.